How's it going, guys? So, undefeated welterweight contender Errol Spence Jr. is going to be fighting veteran Leonard Bundu. Now, I think that this is a good test for Errol Spence Jr. And it's the next logical step in my opinion because Leonard Bundu, whereas he is a little bit past his prime, he's still a very durable fighter, and he went the distance with Keith Thurman. He defeated Frankie Gavin, so obviously this guy is a fairly decent test for a young, inexperienced contender. So I'm looking forward to this fight. It'll be interesting to see if Errol Spence Jr. can outdo Keith Thurman and maybe get the stoppage. Let's just talk about the fight for a second. Now, Errol Spence Jr. I'll be honest, guys. I'm very impressed with Errol Spence Jr. I think he hasn't really put a foot wrong in his career yet. He's looking fantastic. He's knocking the majority of his opponents out. He's very very aggressive. He's not a guy who is just content on winning. He's a guy who likes to take the initiative, which is what I like. You guys know I like aggressive fighters. And Errol Spence Jr., he delivers. He's a very aggressive fighter, and at the same time, he's defensively aware. He's got very good defense to me. Now he does get hit from now and then, but that's just because he's offensive minded. He doesn't really tend to get hit consistently in fights. It's just when he's on the attack, sometimes he leaves himself open for counters. But that's something that I'm sure over time and with experience he can work on. Now, obviously, against Leonard Bundu, he's gonna need to be a little bit more tactful than he was in his last fight because the thing with Chris Algieri, I mean, Chris Algieri just didn't have the punching power to really intimidate Leonard Errol Spence Jr. So Errol Spence Jr. was able to take a lot of risks in that fight, and he was able to just steam forward and just brutalize the guy without worrying about what was coming back. Because, like I said, Chris Algieri just ain't a puncher. But Leonard Bundu, although he's not the biggest puncher in the division, he can punch. I mean, the guy had Frankie Gavin on the canvas and several other guys. So this is a guy that has fairly decent power. So you know, uh, like I said, Errol Spence is going to have to be a little bit more tactful here than he was in most recent fights. Nonetheless, though, I think he's going to win the fight, and I'll be honest, guys. Even though I don't believe that Leonard Bundu has been stopped before, I think that Errol Spence Jr. is going to stop him. I do because I think Errol Spence Jr. I think the main reason he's taking this fight is because he wants to make a statement. He wants to be able to stop a guy that has never been stopped before. Just like he did with Algieri. Algieri is a guy who had been in with Pacquiao, Provodnikov, Khan, and he'd been able to go the distance. And you know, um, Errol Spence wanted to make a statement. He wanted to get the stoppage. He wanted to be the first one to get the stoppage. And I think that he understands that that is the way to really build his brand and really build his name is to be knocking these guys out. These guys that are known for being durable because it's a similar thing that Triple G did. Triple G knocked out a bunch of guys that had never been knocked out before. So and it really, really was good for his brand and good for getting his name out there. So, I think that Errol Spence is going about a similar fashion, trying to knock everybody out, and I like that. He's entertaining. Obviously, he's a southpaw. He's got a wide variety of different punches. He had a vast amateur experience. There's all sorts of stories of this dude sparring with some big names in the sport and doing very well, making a good account of himself. So yeah, I'm excited about Errol Spence Jr. I think he's a very very good fighter. I think his attitude towards fights. I don't really know what he's like outside of the ring, but in the ring, the way that he fights and the approach that he takes, I think he's good for boxing. I do, and I would just after this fight, I suspect he's going to beat Leonard Bundu. I think it's going to be by stoppage. I'm going to stick my neck out there, guys. I'm picking Errol Spence Jr. by a late stoppage, probably after 7 rounds. He'll probably get the stoppage. I think. Who knows? He could get the stoppage anytime, but I think that a durable fighter like Bundu will probably last to the later rounds before getting stopped. And after this fight, I would love to see Errol Spence Jr. step in the ring with Keith Thurman. Do you know what? I think he beats Keith Thurman. I'll stick my neck out right now, and I'll say it categorically. I think I think that Errol Spence Jr. would beat the shit out of Keith Thurman. I honestly do. I think he's a way better fighter, just far more naturally talented than Keith Thurman is, and just a far better athlete than Thurman, in my opinion. I would take him over Sean Porter. Um, I would take him over Adrian Broner. In fact, I don't think he's at welterweight anymore, is he? I can't remember, but yeah, I would take him over Adrian Broner if that fight happens. Um, who else is there? Danny Garcia. I would take him over Danny Garcia personally. I honestly would. Listen, I know that the guy's inexperienced. I know that he still has a lot to prove, but just based on the eye test, I would take him over Danny Garcia any day, guys. I would. I would take him over any of those guys. The only one dude I think that beats him at welterweight at the moment is Kell Brook. I think Kell Brook's moved up, but if Kell Brook were to stay at welterweight, I think he would be Errol Spence Jr. because I don't think that Errol Spence Jr. has enough experience to fight a guy as dangerous as Brook yet. So, but yeah, I don't think Brook will be at welterweight again in his career. Moving up to middleweight, he's always said that he struggles to make weight at welterweight, so I don't see him moving back there. But there are other fights for Errol Spence Jr. Big fights in America. Obviously, the Keith Thurman fight is the one that there's going to be a lot of demand for. As I said, I'd love to see that fight, and I would take Errol Spence over Keith Thurman or Danny Garcia or Sean Porter or any of those guys. I honestly would. Another fight that'd be pretty interesting is Errol Spence Jr. versus Terence Crawford. I mean, why not? I mean, Terence Crawford has said he will move up to welterweight eventually. Love to see the fight. Or why not Errol Spence Jr. versus Pacquiao? I mean, or whoever wins the Pacquiao Jesse Vargas fight. So some really really big fights for this kid, and I hope that they get him big fights because, like I said, aggressive fighters are fighters I like. And in my opinion, fighters that are good for the sport. Fighters that take the initiative. So yeah, based on the eye test, based on just what we've seen, Errol Spence Jr. to me, he he hasn't put a foot wrong, in my opinion. He's doing everything right so far. We'll see what happens in his career, but yeah, let me know what you guys think of this fight. Thanks for watching.